Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 194 of the Rebel Author Podcast. How the fuck are we at nearly 200? I swear to God, I only started this podcast yesterday. Anyway, today I'm talking to James Blatch all about completing his first series and what he learned in the process. But first, to last week's question, which was, what's your favourite social media platform and why? Eden Collier said, I'd say my favourite social media is Instagram, partly because it doesn't suck me in a rabbit hole of big boobied ladies, often with very little on, oh my, like TikTok, and it's not a dumpster fire of fake news and motivational quotes from rich hippies like Facebook or Twitter. I nearly said titter. And I just like nice pictures. Me too, me too. Author Lena M. Johnson said Twitter really clicked for me there for a while, and I met some amazing people there, including a fantastic critique partner. It sort of crashed and burned though, and it's too toxic for me now. These days I prefer Instagram so I can surround myself with cute cat pictures and book content. Edwin Downward said, for all the drama this last year, Twitter still remains my go-to platform of choice. I am building my presence on Mastodon and Instagram, but neither gives me the same level of interaction. Facebook is for close families and friends and select groups. And then CC Christiansen said Instagram. So my question for you this week is actually courtesy of one of my patrons, Lynn. So Lynn says, what do you want readers to feel when they read your books? Okay, the book recommendation this week is, it's a series. It's the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black, so it's YA fantasy. I have to say, the first book I was not sure at the beginning. Something a little bit not that believable. But as I got into, so I listened to the first book in audio and I read almost the whole second book yesterday in physical copy because I had a bit of eye strain, so I had to come away from the computer. But oh my God. It feels like easy, cheesy fantasy. There's and I mean no disrespect when I say that. It's exactly what I wanted, exactly what I need. I don't have to think. It's it's just so fun. And it was everything that I needed. And I have the third book, thank God, in hardback. I don't normally read back to back in the same series, but I have to say I am 100% going to finish the little bit that I've got left of book 2 this evening and then read the whole of book 3. Well, either tonight or tomorrow, including tomorrow. But oh my goodness me, so much fun. It's fae, it's like enemies to lovers, but very, very slow burn. And there's not really any scene. There's a kiss. But it reminded me why I used to love young adult and why I used to read it all the time and why I used to write it. Still kind of technically write it. I still got the manuscript I've got the Scent of Death that needs editing. But anyway, yeah, it was exactly what I needed. And so I'm sharing the Cruel Prince series this week by Holly Black. Okay, so in personal news and update then, as I just mentioned, I'm definitely burning low. Do you know what's really annoying? The fact that rest works. It's so fucking annoying to me. I basically got to yesterday and I woke up with a headache and I had eye strain and I just couldn't. And I did all of the kind of freelance and admin bits that needed doing. But by lunchtime, I was so done in. And even Chloe was like, do you think you need to step away? And I was like, do you think you need to step away? She's always fucking right. It's deeply annoying. So I did step away. And lo and fucking behold, this morning, the headache and almost all of the eye strain has gone. Shocking me and nobody else. It is so wildly frustrating to have this fucking puny skin sack of a mortal carcass. Why can't I just burn at 1,000 degrees forever? It's so annoying. I just want to burn all day long. All day, every day, all fucking night, until I die. I just don't understand why my body will not do what I demand of it. Anyway, so by lunchtime, I stepped away from the computer reluctantly, and I sat in my purple throne under a blanket because I was also, whilst being very frustrated, deeply feeling sorry for myself. And I sat and read, like I say, 3/4 of The Wicked King, which is book 2 in the Cruel Prince series. And then I felt better. Like, what the fuck? Now, the thing is, like, the rational part of me does know that I have not been inputting enough, that I have not been reading enough. And the other thing is, like, there's a lot of I have to reads, you know, because of the podcast, and, you know, I have to read certain things for classes and for the podcast. And then it's just sometimes reading becomes a chore, and I'd forgotten that actually I do have the power to just pick up something that I have chosen to read. And I haven't done that in a while. And it surprised me at how quickly I read yesterday as well. And I think that is the difference between reading because I need to for work or reading because I've chosen to. And it's a reminder to me that I do need to, yes, everybody, I can hear you like rolling your eyes at me, but it is a reminder that I need to make time for that. And yes, I have already started piling up books to take to Turkey, and I am going to literally fucking devour 75 million books whilst I'm away. But the point is I actually need to do that now. So anyway, I would say that my last week has been taken up with, like, try not to clap. It's actually not funny. But if you don't laugh, what are you going to do? Cry? Fucking lay down and give up? Don't fucking think so. Anyway, wow, this episode got ragey quick. Anyway, so I have started book 2. Book 2? No, book 2 is being released this month. Book 3. And this episode is sponsored by Sasha being scatty. Anyway, book 2 is coming out probably by the time this airs, almost, I suspect. And yeah, actually, it will be launch week. And so I am writing book 3. I'm 13,000 words in. But I am, like I say, I missed yesterday because I'm so tired and I have eye strain. So because this is on quite a tight deadline, I really need to spend a little bit of time in the next couple of days just trying to manage my schedule. One of the things that I found very difficult is to be writing book 3 whilst needing to promote book 2. Like the brain splits quite hard. And I think this is where rapid releases like have a benefit because, or people in larger genres who can use things like Facebook ads for advertising, because then there's less pressure on doing like time sucky things like social media. So this does make me wish that I could do Facebook ads, or that maybe I should try maybe for the next series, just because I can't do such huge launches all of the time, and I can't do such huge social launches all of the time whilst I also am drafting. But because I still have freelance at the moment, that's also making it difficult to split my time across all of the different things. So I don't know, maybe I need to outsource more. I'm not really sure. I am at this juncture where I'm going to be releasing more regularly and more types of products as well. And I have got to create some kind of tiered system, a bit like how Elena Johnson talks about having, you know, hard, medium and soft launches, because this is not sustainable. So I need to look at that in the background, and I guess as I start to build a backlist, because this is the other thing, you know, prior to Hearts and Heist, I hadn't had a fiction launch. Well, I had Trey, the third book, but that was, you know, I just put it out. I did nothing really, and so yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot, and I need to then look at what I'm doing in order to make sure that I'm continuing to promote the backlist once I start the next series. So I just feel like I'm in constant learning mode at the moment. It's also different from the non-fiction. And yeah, like I'm loving the fact that I'm learning loads and having to implement loads of systems to make me more effective and efficient. Strategic loves that. Everybody drink. But also I'm fucking tired. And yeah, so anyway, I'm just like buzzed. But also everything's a lot right now. the other thing that I'm excited about is that I'm slowly clawing my way towards the nonfiction, and I have yet another idea for a nonfiction book. And like, this is how I know I'm ready to write nonfiction again, because, you know, for a while I was like, oh, I don't really know what topic to do. And actually now I have, I don't know, 5 or 6 that I want to write, which is more of a problem than not having any. Or it's not that I didn't have any, it's that I wasn't enthused about any of them. Now I'm enthused about loads of them. So yeah, and I'm super excited for the courses as well, because I've got some really great content that I can share like quickly and get it out to you, and like it will answer some of the questions that I get asked regularly. So I'm just super excited to be able to share some of these things, and hopefully they're going to help lots of you. So I'm just filled with joy. I mean, like, my key word for this year was joy. So I'd basically say I'm fucking smashing that one. But yes, so holiday is on the horizon. Launch will be the week as that you listen to this. And basically everything's exciting and fucking brilliant. And apart from the fact that my puny mortal skin carcass is a bit shit. But hopefully doing that thing that everybody talks about that begins with R is going to help me. And I will try to do that more soon, now, tonight. Okay, I'm coming back to being serious this week because I'm doing something a little bit different with the Rebel of the Week. The Rebel of the Week this week isn't a story, but an honorary nod to one of my favourite rebels over the last several years, and that's to Eden's Nan. Unfortunately, Eden's Nan passed away, and her stories have been some of my favourites. This is where we got the Granny Rebellions from, and I just wanted to take a minute to appreciate her life and to say thank you for the stories, and to wish all of Eden's family love, hugs and support, and yeah, just to say thank you so much for all of the stories that you graced the show with, and may you be a rebel in your next life too. Okay, if you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, then please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, we are still quite low. We do need more rebellions, so please, if you do have a story, send it in to us, because we would love to read it out on the show. One new patron this week. Hello and thank you and welcome to Catherine Bellinger. And of course, a big thank you to all of my existing patrons. I really, really appreciate you guys. You do help to keep the show running. You help to pay for the costs, and also you make me feel like what I'm doing is helping. So thank you for the support. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes as well as bonus content, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. Okay, that is enough from me this episode. Let's get on with the interview. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I am joined by James Blatch. James is the co-host of the Self-Publishing Show and co-founder of the Self-Publishing Formula. He's also the writer of Cold War thrillers, and that is what we are talking about today. Hello, James, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Sasha, thank you so much for having me on. Excited to be
thank you. It's been a long time. We've known each other for a long time. And so I'm excited to talk about this and the journey that you've been on. So before we dive in, would you like to tell everyone like a little bit about your journey and kind of how did you come to work with Mark and SPF and your journey in general to how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I actually worked with Mark at the British Board of Film Classification. So we were film examiners, a strange group of people who sit in the dark in Soho watching the films that you get in the cinema, but about 3 months beforehand, and writing reports on them and determining what category they should be, age category. Oh, so it was a brilliant job. And I did it for about 7 years. Mark did it a bit longer. And whilst I was there, I started doing freelance video production because it's not, although it's a brilliant job, it's not one that's going to last a whole lifetime. When I was sort of planning my next move, so I was doing freelance video production, doing quite well with that, working for some of the big advertising agencies like Ogilvy. Mark, I remember, was writing, just discovering indie publishing whilst we were there together. He'd been a published author before, had a pretty miserable time with it, and I did a few bits and pieces with him. He wanted me to do a voiceover, trying to do an audiobook sort of independently. But that was it, really. The only other thing that's relevant for that period is that on November the 1st, 2010, I was bored watching wrestling or whatever we were classifying that day. And I was looking at Twitter, and a husband of one of the fellow examiners in there just tweeted that he was doing NaNoWriMo. I didn't know what NaNoWriMo was. Clicked on the link, read the gist of it, and that was enough. And I just thought, do you know what? I've always wanted to write a book. I'd started and stopped writing books a few times over the years, but I was missing my BBC journalism days. So I started writing this book, basically loosely set about my father's time in the Air Force in the 60s. Did NaNoWriMo, and then went on and finished the book and got it 100,000 words, but it was a mess. I didn't really go back, which is the right way to do a first draft, I now know, but it was an utter mess. And I just stuck it in a drawer like lots of people do, and left it there. So fast forward to after BBFC, I've left. I'm doing my video production. Mark Dawson phones up and says, I want to do an online course to teach people how to self-publish. Could you do the video bit for me? That was the formation of the self-publishing formula. And 8 years later, I'm fully immersed in the world of indie publishing. It wasn't just doing the video anymore. I helped write the courses. I've written and published 3 books. I'm writing my 4th at the moment. I mean, I have to say, the first book, as you well know, Sasha, was a bit of a long haul for me, and I found it really difficult getting to that point. But it's accelerated since then, as people predicted it would once I got the first book out. But we only did the first book really because we'd done the first course was Ads for Authors, really focused on marketing and advertising. That's our area. So it was Facebook ads for authors, and then the next course was going to be more the foundation, like 101 we call it. It's now called Launchpad. And Mark said to me, get that manuscript out, finish it, and that will be the book that will take through the process of this course. So I didn't finish in time for the course, but it is featured in there. And then it became, a bit of a struggle. It was a struggle.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. What I find amazing is that you basically had the picture perfect setup for becoming an author, like having all of this learning in advance, which is why I'm so curious to see the lessons that you have learned. And like, that's the basis for a lot of my questions is like, well, what did you learn? So let's talk about that book one, because as listeners will know, you did have quite the journey. I do remember quite a lot of banter going back and forth between you and I and the London Book Fair about whether or not who was going to owe who pints if who finished what and when. But so tell everyone a little bit about the Cold War thrillers and about how you eventually managed to get over the line of book one, because you shifted and did something different with editors and things, didn't you, in order to help you get over that. So what was the process for you?
Yeah, so when I first started writing, I wrote, despite the fact I read novels, read novels my whole life, read a lot of nonfiction as well. I didn't really understand how books worked. And I started writing this book, and there was huge amounts of, I guess we'd call it info dumping. Actually, what I did was to go back constantly in flashbacks, unnecessary amounts of backstory, just inexperienced writing, instead of moving the story along. So that book, that's why it was sort of hopeless, really. The gist of the story was good, I think, and it remained the same, but the writing was not. And then, so I found it because probably had Mark said to me, right, start writing a book now, I knew a bit more, it would have been different. But having that there, like this mountain that's the wrong way up and lots of access to it, I found it really difficult to sort of rewrite it. I didn't know where to start. And I was doing a podcast interview just like this with Jenny Nash, who is an editor based in California, and she does book coaching. And I didn't really know what book coaching was, but in the interview, she talked to me about book coaching and how it operated. And I thought, this is for me. I mean, it sounded like it was going to get me. And I was pretty low about the book. I felt stressed about it. I felt like I didn't know how to get out of this hole that I was very publicly in, because everyone could see, everyone knew my story. I didn't mind the banter. It wasn't low, but I was distracted with a lot of other work, but I wanted to get out of it. And I spoke to Jenny immediately after the podcast. I said, look, I think this is for me. I think I want to do this book coaching. So she hooked me up, and she sat down with me. And one really important thing she did with me early on, she said, why do you need to write this book? Why do you need to write it? And I wrote a page for her, an answer to that. And what poured out of this was daddy stuff. And, the reason I really wanted to tell the story about who I am, who my father is, sort of the very, very insular individual that he has become through his career, why these military men get to that point. That's what the story was about. So that was the first thing that gave me clarity in rewriting it. And the second thing she said was, excuse me, my book started with a crash, a Vulcan crash, a military aircraft crash. And then the protagonist basically has to work out what the dead person from the crash, his secrets are gradually unfolded, which I thought was quite a neat, clever idea. But when it was quite a long time getting to it, and I was doing a lot of hiding stuff from the reader. And another thing Jenny said, the other important thing she said to me, well, first of all, she said, well, what actually is it? Can you just explain so I understand what has actually gone on? Not as a reader, just tell me. And I told her a couple, again, probably 2 or 3 pages in a Word document of the backstory. And she phoned me up and said, that's the beginning of your book. Tell the story, because that's why readers read the book, to go along the story, not to have bits said this all happened 2 years ago and you weren't there for it. And that changed everything as well. So from that point onwards, I found the writing process came a lot easier. I was also doing these interviews, Sasha, so I was learning stuff about info dumps and adjectives and adverbs and stuff, what not to do. So I had a lot of help before I started my second, wasn't really my second, probably my third draft, but that was the one that turned into the book. And I enjoyed it a bit more at that point.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, because I don't know about you, but I often have to relearn the same lesson over and over again. It's very deeply frustrating. And one of the lessons that I have to learn is about how much I keep from the reader versus how much I keep from the characters, because you often have to keep more from the 2 characters. They can't know things, but your reader can know them, because that draws the reader in. And like literally a book that's coming out this month, I had to rework it in order to give the reader more, but keep more from the characters, because then it creates more kind of like emotional tension for the reader, because they know and the other characters are. But it's like, well, I fucking know that. I don't know. I know that. I don't know why I had to relearn that lesson over and over again. But this is why we have editors, right? Exactly,
yeah. And I think Jenny is a big fan of Dan Brown, who I know some people are sort of snobby about. Dan Brown, he sold a gazillion books so he can dry his eyes with his banknotes. But he is brilliant, I think, at doing exactly that the reader knows everything, has this overall view, and these characters are struggling to work everything out. So it puts the reader feels clever reading a Dan Brown book, because you feel you're a couple of steps ahead of the characters. And there's the old adage about the bomb under the dinner table, isn't there? That, you know, that one where...
Or Chekhov's gun? No?
Or not quite Chekhov's gun, but it's to do with tension. So a clever thing is if you've got a dinner party and somebody has planted a bomb under it, which obviously becomes revealed when the bomb goes off or they discover the bomb. But isn't it a better scene if the reader knows the bomb's there at the beginning of the dinner party before, for anyone else? So that's the bit about hiding from, thinking you're being clever, hiding something from the reader for tension. Actually, you're doing the opposite. So
yeah. And it's definitely a lesson that I had to relearn. This is why we have editors, because sometimes we know these things, but we get so wrapped up in the stories that we're telling that we actually have to draw those elements out. But hey, this is what editing is for. Okay, so what was that process like working with a coach? Because correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't write the whole draft, you wrote parts of the draft and sent it off, is that right? And then so that's very different to how other people write. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so you wrote, you'd write a chapter or a scene each week, and you'd send that off and you get feedback. So at the beginning of the week, you get feedback on the scene from before, or the chapter, and then you then progress through. So the idea is, and it's an odd way that traditionally we write books. Like before indie publishing, you sit in the dark in your house and you write a book and you have no idea, you've done no market research. Perhaps you like reading this type of book, so you write it. And then you send it out and you cross your fingers and you hope it's right. And you haven't spoken to a single professional in the world about how to write or what writing is or to help you. You wouldn't do anything else like that. Or you wouldn't do gymnastics in your house on your sofa and then turn up to the Olympics, would you? You'd get a coach from day one who'd teach you all the fundamentals. So this is a bit like that. It's basically really good for beginning authors to teach them, handhold them through a scene. So if you imagine you've written a scene and they come back to say, actually, the reason this scene didn't work very well is because you had this big info dump at the beginning. I didn't know what an info dump was. That takes the reader out. There's some head hopping here. People know what head hopping is. You have to be told and taught it because Actually, I mean, I'm reading a James Patterson book at the moment that has head hopping in it, but it's a strange thing that I think you can get away with a bit of it, but it's better if you don't. So you're basically being taught the fundamentals as you go along. I found it a really, really useful process, and I'll give you trying to remember the cost. It's probably about £3,000. So it's about the same cost as a development editor of a sort of 100,000 word novel, but it is effectively development edited by the end.
Are you still using this process, or you've
I'm not using Book Coach. I am using a development editor. So I have my last 2 books use a development editor, and I'm stalling a bit. Here I am again, stalling a bit. I've changed tack a little bit from 3 Cold War thrillers. I'm doing a sort of spy espionage, same characters actually, but just moving it forward about 4 years. And one of the side characters, who was a spy, is now going to be the main character, a bit more Cold War espionage, John le Carré type. And I'm struggling a little bit to adapt to that. So I might go back to the development editor to help kickstart that.
Okay, well, so I'm definitely going to ask you about that later on. But talk to me about what changed, because you went from taking a while to do book 1 to actually publishing another 2 books in quite quick succession. I did have a look. Was it like 6 to 8 months between the books? That's quite a lot faster than what you were doing.
Yeah.
So what changed in your process? Like, what enabled you? What were the key things that enabled you to get faster?
I think everything I'd learned from book 1, first of all, made me a more confident writer. I'm a very story driven. I know it should always be about character, but just the way my mind works is quite logical. I need the story there. I have to have the story. And the story came to me really quickly with book 2, almost a fully. And what I tend to do is to write maybe 2,000 to 3,000 words explaining the story. And once I've got that, I never look at that document again, but I then confidently write the book, knowing where I'm going.
Oh, without an outline?
Well, that is effectively my outline.
Okay.
I don't look at it again. I just know in my head what's going to happen, and then I don't outline to scene level.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, I have a bunch of Post-its on a page, and that's about it. But it's enough.
Yeah, and other people have an incredibly detailed spreadsheet where every scene is plotted out, and other people, like Marie Force, who says she doesn't write a single thing down. She has no idea what's going to happen when she starts writing. So it's all extremes, isn't there?
Yeah,
she says she loves writing books because it's like reading it, finding out what's going to happen.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It also blows my mind. I just need a map. That's all. Like kind of like a skeleton or a spine, just to see where it's going, and then I can, just make shit up.
Yes, and then you can really focus on the character. Once you've got, I find once you've got that story, then you start to think, well, who is your character? What are they like at the beginning? What are they going to be like at the end? What are they going to learn? There's that great list of Pixar. I think it's 23 different character journeys in Pixar, and the famous one is Wizard of Oz, which is you already had what you thought you needed, which is a great one. But they're all variations of that, and so once you've got that, then you can really focus on character. So that's why I've found it easier. And the reason I'm stalled now is the story. It's not the character. I know exactly what the character is going to do. I know who she is. I know what she's learning and who she's going to be at the end of it, but I can't get the story right. And I think because I've read so many John le Carrés, and his stories are always so brilliant and complex, I'm feeling a little bit in his shadow that I'm not good enough for that. So I need to disabuse myself of that.
I know that you've spoken to Becca Syme on your podcast. Have you done your Clifton Strengths yet?
I did ages ago, but I probably...
You know what they are?
No, I can't remember. I'll have to dig them out. I've got them somewhere. And then I was going to say,
that, because I bet the answer is in there in terms of like how to get out of it. Like the strengths have enabled me to go from taking like 6 months on average to write a book to writing a book in about 3 weeks. So it's really changed like my process and stuff. So if you are stuck, I guarantee the answer in how to get unstuck is in those strengths somewhere.
I'm making a note to to look it up.
Drop me an email. Let me know, because I'm also intensely nosy and have to know what they are. Okay, so I'm going to ask sort of a couple of questions about this next topic. And in January, you did a public post explaining that you've learned some huge lessons, and you're making a shift, which is sort of what you're talking about with the John le Carré move. But you also changed and rebranded covers. So can you talk first, before we talk about the shift, let's talk about the rebrand and why you decided to do that. Like, what was kind of the driver behind it, and do you have results? Do you know whether or not it worked for you? Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so covers is an interesting one. I do love the whole subject of covers, and I'm big friends with Stuart Bayes, who's my cover designer. Mark's cover designer has done some, and funnily enough, has done John le Carré covers in the past. And he talks a lot about the role of the cover, which is not what you might think it is. You kind of want your cover to be an amazing picture that's going to look different and stand out from the crowd. And the opposite actually is true. You want your cover to fit in, because its only job is to tell a potential reader this is the type of book they read. And if it doesn't have those tropes on it, it's not going to do that fundamental job. And so because I was writing Cold War thrillers, not a huge market, not a huge genre area. You get espionage is a much broader genre actually, but military aviation, it was Dale Thomas, people like that. So there aren't that many authors writing it. Tom Clancy had a stretch. So we sort of came up with our best guess for that. And Stuart does like the sort of single character usually with his back to camera. And that was, I think I might even have a copy. Well, you're not using video, are you? But
I'm not, but I can drop it into the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was the original one, which looks a bit like a thriller. And it was, I was writing a thriller, so that worked for me. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. It says RAF plane on there. And funnily enough, that's me, because we couldn't get a proper...
wow.
We couldn't get a proper photograph released by the MOD of the correct aware for 1950. So I went onto eBay, bought it all, and then went and did a shoot.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
But the sales were okay, but I did notice after a while that my also boughts were this group of other writers who were doing similar thing, and all of them had a different type of cover. What they did, because it's a very male dominated kind of not very touchy-feely kind of environment, and they all had the vehicle, whether it was a warship, a helicopter, a jet. They had that front and center, and there were no characters in sight. And that was sort of, I worked out that's probably my audience, even though my book has more, I think, more character in it and is a bit more touchy-feely. The reality is it's selling into that group. And so I went to Stuart, talked to him, he said, I completely agree. I've had a look at that as well. And he redesigned it. I didn't have to ask twice, and he did a fantastic. So this became the cover, which has the same aircraft, but the aircraft is now prominent and there are no characters in sight. And yeah, so, and in terms of, things it's only one or two books. It's quite hard for me to look. There's no big spike somewhere, but gradually I have been selling more books. And I think that's been a lot. I think the Facebook ads have worked better with that cover than they did with the previous cover. And I made a profit with book one. I made about £800 or £900, I think, in year one, first full complete year. And I'm carried on. In fact, I had my first £1,000 month this year. I had a book bub at the end of last year, which helped that. Mm-hmm. And that tail lasted quite a long time. So I haven't totted up last month, but I imagine I'm probably going to be making probably half that a month in profit with 2.5 books, effectively, with 2 books and a novella. So I think the covers are working, and the covers all match each other. So,
and are you finding it's easier to make profit the more books you have?
Yeah, I mean that's the key thing for us. It's a big takeaway, isn't it? Indie publishing is about numbers. Unfortunately, you can't do a JD Salinger or just write one book and sit back. It's the reason Mark makes lots of money from his books is he had like 30 books or 25 in the series or something, and the more you can write. And we have a small indie publisher called Fuse Books, and we have lots of submissions, but one of the things we can be fussy about it. So one of the things we say is you've got to have at least 6 books in the series out now, because I think that's the minimum to make a decent amount of money. And so I need to be writing again now.
Or 6 books in the same genre, if not in the same series.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's the bit
that they can go on to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the bit that people miss. They think, I just need 10 books. Actually, you don't. You need 10 books all in the same genre before you will start to make the money. Because as much as us writers will read prolifically across different genres, that is not what the general reading populace does. I have a friend who is a prolific reader, and it genuinely shocked me, like when we talked about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, so what do you read? Just science fiction. Wait, what? The first time I kind of learned that people don't actually shift from what they were reading was absolutely boggling to me. But it really is true. I still fight against that truth, thinking that people will read, but they don't. They just don't. Okay, so let's talk about all of the lessons that you learned, because you did do this big public post on Facebook in January, talking about how you'd gone away on holiday, which is what everybody does. We go away, we have some headspace, and then we think, oh shit, we need to shift. So talk to me about that. What was the big lesson that you learned, and what have you done differently since?
So the big lesson really was that I had written into a small niche, and I'd written books that were driven by my understanding of who I am and my family stuff, and trying to explore all of that, which is basically that my father's this very non-demonstrative, I don't want to say unloving because that sounds cruel and unkind to him, but basically not there's no I love you, no hugging. It's just simply who he is. And I grew up with that, and I've got a bit of that. I've tried to shake it off with my children, but it was a big thing. It still is a big thing. And my books are exploring that. We all want to know, where we come from and so on. And I think my takeaway after coming away is that enough now. I've done that 3 times, 3 books, 3 versions of that. I think I've explored it. I am fascinated with his RAF career. He had an incredible RAF career, which he doesn't talk about, obviously. And these books are brilliant fun for me to do. But if I'm serious about having, money going into, I'm probably facing retirement in 10 years or so, I need to shift into a more broadly read genre and apply the lessons I've learned into that. So that's why I chose spy espionage, because that is just it's a bigger genre. People are a bit put off. If you're not into aeroplanes, I think my books can be a bit off-putting. I mean, people who read them, I get great feedback. And, my wife reads a lot. She reads a huge amount. And she said, your book's perfect for women and book clubs, but it just doesn't look like that.
Isn't that frustrating? How do you feel? Because a lot of writers talk about this like tug of war that they have between writing like into a more commercial genre and also making sure that they're writing what they want to write. And so this was the shift that I did in the last couple of years, was to write in a more commercial genre, and lo and behold, making a lot more money. So yeah, talk to me about how you feel about that kind of, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, are you still excited? But just reassure people that it can be done is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think the shift, as long as the shift isn't too massive, if you're going from romance to science fiction, I mean, that's going to take you out of why would you go from romance? It's the biggest genre in the world. Maybe the other way around. That's going to be difficult. People might not want to do it, but I think you can shift into a genre like I've done, from military thrillers to spy espionage, and have a lot of overlap. Like I say, it's one of the main characters from the first book. But I also think, Sasha, that a book is a book is a book. The storytelling is the same. The character journeys are the same, whether you're reading cowboy romance or military thrillers. And actually, we shouldn't moan too much about, I can't write. I don't want to write in a commercial genre, like it's impossible. It's the same thing. So you're just making good choices. Now, if people don't want to do that, if they absolutely only want to explore family issues or whatever, that's fine, as long as they don't then complain that no one's buying their books and not making enough money, because, you do have to make some sacrifices. And I think it is an Achilles heel. Some writers, they sort of have their quirks and they can't get them out of the way. And so their books are always quirky, and quirky is quite a dangerous thing to be in a commercial environment.
Yeah, I think you have to wait
mainstream.
I think you have to wait until you've built your audience. Once you have an audience, you can do whatever you like, because then you've built the trust and like that relationship with the readers that they will try things that you want to do. But I do think that if you want a career, you do have to do that. I also think that many of us do need to write that first series and just get it out of our system, because I did the same thing. Yeah. I wrote a series that wasn't commercial, and it's like, it wasn't commercial because I couldn't really explain very simply what it was. Like, whereas now, when you write with a commercial focus, it's very easy to explain simply what the book is, because you go into it like choosing those elements specifically. And I actually think the other thing that really annoys me is that people look down on that, like writing commercially.
as if it's either lesser or easier to do, but actually it's fucking difficult to nail something mid-center market that is exactly what readers want. That in itself is like a science of all of these elements that you have to know and understand how to work them and how to put them together. So everybody needs to stop. Because I said
yes, stop all that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I completely agree. The snobbiness is ridiculous around this subject. I often think of Ian Banks, who writes. He's written some brilliant novels. I mean, Booker-winning novels, disturbing novels. But he also writes a sci-fi series, the Culture series, which I absolutely love. And I remember once he said people often assumed that. That he wrote the sci-fi series for money because it was like a genre series, and that allowed him then to indulge himself in those other books. But it was the other way around, actually. The Wasp Factory and everything were huge sellers and brought in lots of money, and he wrote the Culture series for fun because he really enjoyed it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's too much snobbery around anyway. As indie authors, we know this anyway, don't we? We see it on social media every day. You still get writers in the traditional space who sort of look down and go on and on about how to write query letters, and often feel like replying to people saying, "Don't write query letters.
Yeah, sell your books."
Yes, write more books. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so what are you going to do differently? You've learned a lot of lessons from this first series. Are there any marketing things you're going to do differently? Are there any things in terms of like how you're going to be publishing or like the craft? Yeah, what are you going to be doing differently in order to set this book up for profitability? Because that was your focus in like the big public post that you did.
Yeah, so my first 3 books were standalone, but with overlapping characters. My next series will be one book after another. I mean, not necessarily have to be read in order, a bit like the James Bond books. It just makes a lot more sense to read them in order. And I think that's a really good. You've got a very definitive, clear place for your reader to go at the end of your book. That is a commercial success for you, and that's making selling books much easier. So that's the first thing. This will be a series. Susie, who's the main character, is quite young at the beginning, and I know in my mind, but very roughly, I know she's going to end up as the first, basically the Stella Rimington real life character, the first head of MI5, female head of MI5 in the UK. So that's going to be in the 1990s, and we're in 1970 at the moment. So yeah, one book after another. That's the first thing to do. The other stuff and the marketing stuff, I'm pretty good at. Funnily enough, sitting at the ankles of Mark Dawson, who's probably the leading protagonist of Amazon ads and Facebook ads. So I'm pretty good on those. I run them, and I don't think I'll do that much differently. I just hopefully will have a better product or an easier sellable product.
Okay, how will it affect you? You talked about the fact that it's a very like lads kind of genre, and the fact that you've got a female protagonist. Is that bucking the market trend, or like how is that gonna work?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. That probably, I don't know. I mean, I've thought about it, but I just really want her to be the protagonist. I just think she's the perfect protagonist for this. And she's a girl, and I wanted to write a girl. And I had a strong mother. I was a big fan of Princess Leia. She was, I was 10 years old when Leia turned up in that. If you forget everything else that happened in Star Wars afterwards, in that first film, I still argue to this day Princess Leia was one of the strongest characters in the film. She took over the leadership the moment they rescued her, put herself in charge, and then dealt quite cleverly with the men around her. Such a shame that they then didn't know what to do with her for the rest of the films. But so that I've always found that as an inspiration, and I want Susie to be the main character. But yeah, in all honesty, I suppose if I look around at the spy thrillers, none of them are female leads. Might be a problem. We'll see. I've got to give myself at least one challenge, though, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I hope you're going to have a female beta reader. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you what, I've just taken over. We've just signed an author at Fuse, but it's called John Ellsworth, who writes legal thrillers, sort of Michael Grisham, is it?
Yeah, John Grisham. John Grisham.
He's Michael. John Grisham style legal thrillers. And I was looking at his data, and the vast majority of his readers is a male protagonist called Michael Gresham. The vast majority of his readers are women in their 60s.
Interesting.
And that's legal thrillers. So I think women could well be my market. Hopefully they will not be balking at the idea of a female lead. I mean, it adds a really interesting element to it. A woman in 1970s on the back of the kind of 60s feminist movement, and obviously at the vanguard of that in this room of crusty old men who want her to fail the whole time. I think adds a really good tension. There's lots of good reasons for having her there.
Is she straight?
She is so far undisclosed. She did sleep with somebody in book one, but that's because she was undercover in a CND camp and wanted to further her.
The reason I ask is because often women in that era, in those very male-dominated kind of arenas, faced a lot of one, sexism, but also assumed homophobia, regardless of whether or not they were, actually straight or not. And so I just wondered, whether or not you'd thought about that, because if you're setting it in the 70s, that's going to be a really the glass ceiling, all of those kind of social dynamics are that's very interesting. I think the women are going to love it. Okay, so I know that you use TikTok. And I know that you know Adam as well. I met Adam in Seville, which was wonderful. He's so sweet. I love him. But anyway, you use TikTok as part of your marketing platform. So how do you use it? What have you learned about TikTok, and how are you using it to build a platform and or sell books for you?
Yeah, I'm loving TikTok. First of all, I love the platform. I find it, obviously you get shown what you want to get shown on social media platforms through the algorithm, but I found it a much more sort of joyous and enjoyable place and creative place to be than Twitter, which I find sort of toxic a lot of the time. So I migrated quite quickly onto TikTok. And I think there are two ways of doing this in TikTok to sell books. One is to do brutally down the hashtag BookTok route. So you look and feel, your look there, people can't see this, but you've got a bookshelf behind you. It's a perfect look for TikTok, for BookTok, says to everyone that's who you are, what you're doing. And you talk about other people's books, you talk about your books, and you post 3 times a day and you sell books that way. And lots of people are doing that very well. It's like their main source of income, which is great because it's free. It's organic at the moment as well. But I'm doing it slightly differently. And so I've got a specialist area, which is Cold War military aircraft. So I really focus on that. I post lots of interesting stuff about that. I've got lots of footage from my time in the BBC as a correspondent when I was in jets and stuff. And I do a live every week with a Cold War, not with the Cold War, the defense analyst called Sean Bell, who was a Harrier pilot back in the day and flew me. And that's why we know each other. So we do a live. We're doing one tonight, actually. And in between that, I talk about books. So less so than a BookTok thing. But I try to be as creative as possible, bringing the books in as much as possible. It's not the kind of page flippy buy my book post doesn't work so well for me. What does work is taking out characters. So last night, we can talk about AI if you want, because I'm massively into AI at the moment. And I asked Midjourney, which is generates AI images, to imagine the characters in my books. I gave Midjourney all the information about the characters in my book. Came up with these characters, which were brilliant, absolutely fantastic from the final flight. They gave them to me in little square pictures. I actually wanted them iPhone shaped. So I went into the new beta of Photoshop, which has something called generative fill in it. And Photoshop created the picture. It's unbelievable how quick and easy this was. And it looked stunning. So that was my post last night. These are the characters from my book, Final Flight. What do you think? And that's actually worked really well. So I've seen a spike in, I say a spike. It's only been 6 sales above average overnight. But that immediately has led people to go and seek out the book. So trying to be clever and imaginative, it is possible to shift books on TikTok without question.
Yeah.
And Adam Beswick is living proof of that, of course.
Yeah, well, I on launch day of the new pen name, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was over 50% of my sales were paper for fiction. Wow, yes. Which is unheard of.
That's exactly what I saw last night as well. Yeah, people want the TikTok audience tend to buy the physical books. We forget, you see, we advertise to Kindle readers most of the time, and I narrow nearly all my targeting and interests on Facebook to people interested in the Kindle store. And you forget that most people still read physical books. There's a big market out there. But one of the great things about TikTok Shop You can put your book on there. You can get it printed however you get it printed, probably just author copies from Amazon. So they're like £5.50 or whatever you pay off Amazon. Now, if you sell that on Amazon, you and I know, and your audience know, you've got to price that at about £13.99 or something to make £1.50 or £2. TikTok will sell it. They'll take 48 pence. That's their commission of that sale, and they at the moment are also including postage. So they spit out a postage label for you. So you don't have to pay for postage. So
what?
And you can put
that. Know that.
Yes, I know. Now, it might be a special deal for me because I do know them, and they may be encouraging me to obviously because I've got a podcast. But it's definitely worth it, investigating. And at our conference later this month, they are going to present on this subject on how to use TikTok Shop to sell your books.
I was going to say that the only downside to using TikTok Shop is you have to have a business account, which then does limit the amount of sounds that you can use.
It does, yeah. And annoyingly, after I'd gone to, it was quite fiddly putting that post together last night, couldn't put my product tag on there because I'd used some commercial music, and I honestly couldn't be bothered at that stage to go back and re-choose the music. So that didn't have, I still sold books because people can, the last shot is the book and people just go off and look for it on Amazon.
Yeah, they're very trained to do that. I have definitely noticed a difference because of nothing like Adam's success, but still, it's growing and showing that there is audience, and you can sell more or less any niche on TikTok as well. Like there are so many little clusters of niches once you train the app to know what it is. Like your feed, I suspect, is all planes and I don't know, lads things, whereas mine's like lesbian thirst traps and like lesbian books. So like
well, maybe if Susie becomes a lesbian, then maybe I'll start seeing. Did you say lesbian thirst traps?
Oh my god,
what on earth does that mean?
It's what turns all straight women gay. No, it's basically like where oh God, how do I even explain thirst trap?
This is very reminiscent of our conversations at London Book Fair after a couple of pints.
Yeah, I know. It's basically where women will do like a transition, and they'll, so they'll go from like wearing a dressing gown or something, and then they'll like flash an arm up, and then when it comes down, they're in like full makeup, and it's like all sexy, and so it like, like it's shocking if you're a straight woman, it's shocking that you may find these women actually attractive, and it's like a whole thing. Like, anyway, let's move on from that.
Hence the expression. Anyway, yes. So that's on your timeline, and I get English Electric Lightnings on my timeline quite a lot. Well, also I have mucked up my timeline because I'm quite into comedy, cricket, and golf as well. So, but it is quite good to keep your timeline as focused as possible on what your subject is.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you one last big question, which is, what have you learned about advertising since working with Mark and kind of all your time working with Facebook ads and Amazon ads? Any sort of quick rapid fire tips for listeners?
My first rapid fire tip is you don't know what's going to work when you start advertising. So brace yourself for losing money over campaigns, but you're not wasting that money. You're learning, and you're going to get data from those campaigns. You get all sorts of data in the background in Facebook and in Amazon, and you can then use that to create the campaigns that will make you money. And I say that because it's depressing when you see people say, well, Facebook ads don't work. I ran them for 3 days, £5 a day for 3 days. I haven't made a single sale. That's not how this works. You've got to give yourself $100, spend $100 over 4 days, and then just let it run. Don't worry about sales. Don't worry about anything else. Then analyze it. Then look at sales. Then look at clicks. And then look at who, is it men? Is it women? Are they 20, 30, 40, 50? All sorts of other stuff you can get in there. What devices are they using? What platform are they on? Then pick out the bits that are working, and Facebook will tell you that in black and white, and do a campaign that's just that. So that's a very quick and dirty way of telling you how to optimize a campaign. That's the biggest thing I've learned. However much you think you know your audience, you'll be surprised probably who's actually reading your book. So pay attention to that. And there's the Amazon ads key to that is their keywords, search terms. It's called search terms. So you can actually look at the actual search terms that people clicked in that led them to your product page, which might not even be the keywords in fact, often they're not the keywords that you proposed. And that's really useful to find that out. So that's that. Also, I just think at the moment, AI is making image generation a lot easier. So that's what I discovered yesterday. So you can take little bits if you've got like the Texas version of your cover, which is obviously going to be almost iPhone shaped in that dimension, you can create a widescreen version of that. Just tell Photoshop Beta how to do that, and not how to do it, what you want. Who knows how it does it, but you tell it what you want. So I think there's a quickly developing market for indie authors in their kitchens creating really professional looking images very quickly.
Are you using GPT as well?
I am. So yesterday I used it for the first time properly. Mark's been using it for a while to generate copy and targeting ideas for our new series that we're running, these legal thrillers. So I'll get some help with that. So it's a bit early in my experimentation with that, and I'm yet to actually start running the campaigns, but I'm preparing them based on what ChatGPT has told me about the comp authors, the type of language to use, and some ideas on targeting.
That's so interesting. I'm more the other way. I've been using GPT more than Midjourney. I tried, but I couldn't really prompt Midjourney very well. I don't know why, but GPT, I've really started to find, like, I just get it to do anything I don't enjoy doing, like writing captions for social media. I fucking hate writing captions. Like, I just cannot. So I get it to write them. And then you just tweak it, right? So it sounds more like you. But yeah, it's so useful for anything that is like a rote repeat task that you have to do a lot in your back end systems. Anyway, this is the Rebel Author podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
Wow, when did I unleash my inner rebel? I needed to have thought about this in advance.
That's why I send the questions.
Yeah, I don't know how rebellious I am, really, Sasha.
Everyone says that. Trust me. Like, there's a rebellion in there.
What did I do that was rebellious? I mean, I don't know. I mean, book 2, I suppose I did just write the story and stick with it, and turn down a little bit of advice from the development editor on that, because I had a strong feeling about it. I'm not sure that's particularly rebellious. God, I can't really think of anything.
It doesn't have to be like in the publishing industry. It can be like from childhood, or I get all kinds of things from, all kinds of random rebellions from.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the most dangerous thing I did that almost killed me or blew my legs off is, you've got to remember, I went to school pre-internet.
Okay.
And so pre-internet, you went to the library and looked up an encyclopedia, so if you want to look something up. And as a boy, became quite interested in gunpowder and what actually was gunpowder and how do you make it. And we did a load of research down the library, discovered the ingredients, which I'm not going to say out loud here.
Please don't.
One of the ingredients you had to get from a chemist, and we went in. The guy looked at us and said, "Why do you want this?" And we had no plausible answer for it. We didn't know what it was for, apart from what we wanted to use it. We're going to tell them. So then we looked up what it was for, and actually it was a type of cleaning product. So we went back to a different chemist in Huntingdon High Street, went in there, and the guy said, "What do you want it for?" And we said, "My mum wants it for cleaning." He said, "Oh, okay." And he handed it over. So we created gunpowder. We created this gunpowder. We thought it got the mix right, and we had a pile of it. And we were behind the lower school, Hinchinbrook Lower School in Huntingdon.
I nearly went to Hinchinbrook. Oh my goodness!
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, this lower school building burnt down, but not because of this. Let me point that out several years later.
No.
Yes, it's now houses. But we were there, and we had this pile, and we thought, well, I guess we have to light it. Someone had a box of matches or a lighter. I can't remember what. We did a little like cartoon trail out of it, and so we stood not that far away, probably 5 yards, lit that, and the powder leading up to the little main dump of powder went, and it went like that, and there was a huge plume of white smoke, and nothing else particularly happened. And we just scarpered. We just ran. We ran around to the front of the school, and everybody's staring at this massive plume of white smoke, including the teachers going, "What on earth is that?" It quickly dissipated. It was one thing. What I now know is what we didn't do was compact it. We had created such an enormous amount of gunpowder. If we compacted it, it would have probably killed us. It would have certainly blown our legs off. That would have been a major explosion. And honestly, had we thought about it, we probably would have compacted it, because that's what you do for a bomb. Honestly, it was such a stupid thing to do.
Oh my! And you did it on school grounds during school time.
Did it at lunchtime, yeah. So there were chickens. They were called chicken sheds behind the school, behind lower school. There were no chickens in there, not in my day. And there was a little gap between the chicken sheds and the school, so you were sort of hidden from everybody, but people walking past. out there. So that's probably, I mean, I've done a few stupid things, but that's the one I can remember.
I mean, that is incredibly rebellious.
Come to think of it, it's quite rebellious.
That is rebellious.
I wasn't a good school pupil. I was quite rebellious, I have to say.
See, I told you there were stories in there.
Yeah.
Okay, tell everyone where they can find out more about you. If you want to talk about the conference, like anything else that you would like to add, I can make sure this goes out before the conference if there are still tickets.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, so I think the self-publishing stuff is of most interest to your audience. So that is, we're selfpublishingformula.com. We're the home of the self-publishing podcast. All the stuff is on there at the main website. And we have our annual conference, in London, over 2 days, 20th, 21st of June. So coming up soon. There probably will be tickets. We kept 100 back for buffering. And also when we started launching this last year, we were still in COVID and we still weren't sure whether they were going to say to us, you've got to have gaps in the audience. So I suspect if we get to I think it's 816, we get to that point in the next week or two, we'll release that 100. So it's likely there'll be tickets, and you can find them at selfpublishingformula.com/SPS live, a self-publishing show live. And if you want to know anything about me, I'm on TikTok, James R. Blatch, and jamesblatch.com is my website where I host my books. And hopefully book 4 will be added to that before the end of this year, although I'm not promising that because we're halfway through the year suddenly, aren't we?
I know, it's shocking. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, a big thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black, you are listening to James Blatch, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Morgana Best all about direct sales, so join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher, and when you have a moment, please leave a review.